Hello guys. Yes, that is the username of the subscriber who suggested today's video, so thank you to Hello Guys for the suggestion, and as always, this is the People's Channel, so don't hesitate to leave your own video ideas in the comments, and like the suggestions you'd like to see best, so I know which ideas are most popular. To be clear on the concept of this video, this isn't necessarily the best player each team has sold. Spurs, for example, have sold the likes of Gareth Bale and Luka Modric, but there isn't a fat lot for them to regret about those sales. They knew both players were exceptional and did all they could to keep hold of them, but ultimately Real Madrid proved to be irresistible from the players' perspectives. So, where possible, I'm looking for players that clubs willingly sold and live to regret. Here is one player every Premier League club regrets selling. Arsenal. Serge Gnabry. Arsenal have sold a few good players in recent years, and the likes of Jeffrey Adelaide and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain deserve honourable mentions. The form of Serge Gnabry over the last couple of seasons makes him a very obvious standout candidate though, and Arsenal let the wide man go for just £5 million in 2016. The German youngster spent 5 seasons in North London, making 18 appearances in 2 years as part of the first team squad. An unsuccessful loan move to West Brom, where Tony Pulis described him as not being good enough for the Baggies, was presumably the final nail in the coffin for Gnabry's Arsenal career. He was snapped up by Werder Bremen, where an excellent season prompted Bayern Munich to activate his €8 million release clause. Following his season on loan at Hoffenheim, Gnabry stepped into the Bayern first team with real confidence last season, even picking up the Bayern Player of the Year award. The departures of Ian Robben and Frank Ribery in the summer have made the 24-year-old German even more integral at the Allianz Arena, and Arsenal can only watch on and wonder what may have been. Aston Villa. ADAMA TRAORE. There are a plethora of candidates for Aston Villa, from Enda Stevens to Mark Albrighton, but the most exciting player the Birmingham club willingly let go has to be ADAMA TRAORE. Villa brought Traore to England from Barcelona, but he played just 10 league games at Villa Park as the club was relegated. In the summer, Villa looked to cut their losses and sold the wide man to Middlesbrough. A mixed debut campaign was followed by a decent season in the Championship, with Traore's raw ability never having been in doubt. Nuno Espirito Santo signed the 24-year-old in 2018 for £18 million, and it once again took Traore a season to settle down. This season has been by far and away the best of his career, and if he can keep improving, Wolves have a real player on their hands. Villa's survival hopes might look a little rosier if they'd had ADAMA TRAORE in their ranks this season. Bournemouth. Tyrone Mings. There's nothing to split the two main candidates at Bournemouth, namely Danny Ings and Tyrone Mings. Both players would be godsends for Eddie Howe right now, since the Cherries have been leaking goals at one end and failing to score many at the other this season. In fairness, the club wasn't keen to lose Ings, who was signed by Eddie Howe following his move to Burnley for £1 million, but they perhaps could have fought harder to keep hold of him. Mings, on the other hand, was never in favour at the Vitality Stadium, failing to hit double figures for appearances in each of his 4 seasons with the club. Following an impressive half-season on loan at Aston Villa, Mings joined Villa permanently in a deal worth between £20 and £25 million in the summer. He has since become a full England international, and Bournemouth would benefit from some of that added steel at the back. Brighton. Oliver Norwood. Oliver Norwood has won promotion from the Championship 3 times, but Chris Wilder is the first manager to consider the midfielder good enough to hack it in the Premier League. The former Manchester United trainee is intelligent, good on the ball, and capable of dictating play. He was signed by Brighton in 2016 and was a regular as the Seagulls won promotion from the Championship, but he joined Fulham on loan the following season. Norwood has been excellent under Chris Wilder ever since, as the Blades push for a European spot, and I think he'd walk into the current Brighton midfield. Burnley. Kieran Trippier. Burnley have sold lots of very good players in recent years, particularly centre forwards, but rarely have they actually wanted to sell them. The same is true of the sale of Kieran Trippier, making this one of the weakest inclusions in this video, but I can't think of anyone Burnley really lived to regret willingly and happily offloading. Kieran Trippier spent 3 seasons at Turf Moor, having arrived from Man City, and his excellent deliveries made him a real weapon on the right flank for Sean Dyche. Following Burnley's relegation, it was a question of who, rather than if, anyone would trigger his £3.5 million release clause, and the eventual suitors were Tottenham. Trippier has since starred for England at the 2018 World Cup and signed for Atletico Madrid, and I'm sure Sean Dyche would love to have him back in claret and blue, even if he never really wanted to get rid of him. Chelsea. Kevin De Bruyne. No team has willingly let go future world-class footballers as frequently as Chelsea. Of the plethora of players I could mention, the trio of Mohamed Salah, Romelu Lukaku, and Kevin De Bruyne stand out. and of the three, there are no prizes for guessing which one I think the Blues were most foolish to offload. Kevin De Bruyne spent just 2 seasons at Chelsea, one on loan in the Bundesliga, and he was sold to Wolfsburg in 2014. He won the Bundesliga Player of the Year award the following season, prompting Manchester City into a £55 million move, and the Belgian has been among the best midfielders on earth ever since. Crystal Palace. NATHANIEL CLYNE. Crystal Palace are in a bit of a similar boat to Burnley, in the sense that they've sold some very good players despite their best attempts to keep hold of them, but there are a few players they've sold happily who've gone on to prove them wrong. NATHANIEL CLYNE's talents were certainly well appreciated at Selhurst Park, and his inevitable departure for Southampton came as a serious blow. Clyne was on the move once again not long after, this time to Liverpool, where an unfortunately timed injury paved the way for young Trent Alexander-Arnold's emergence in the first team. Of course, Alexander-Arnold's exquisite form ever since has prevented Clyne from returning to first team football, and maybe a return to Palace wouldn't be the worst move in the next stage of his career. Everton. John Lundstrom. Everton have reluctantly sold a couple of excellent players in recent times, and they were literally powerless to prevent the sale of Gerard Deulofeu, who had a buyback clause written into his transfer from Barcelona. In terms of those willingly sold by the Toffees, Brighton centre-back Shane Duffy and Sheffield United midfielder John Lundstrom stand out. I'm not sure either would actually be of enormous benefit to the current Everton side, but both are certainly valued at a lot more than the £1.7 million that the Toffees received for the duo. Given that I had to pick one of them between the two, I've gone for John Lundstrom, as Everton sometimes seem to like willing runners from midfield who are happy to run in behind, stretch a game, and create space for their forward players. Leicester City. ANDREJ KRAMARIC. It's a tale of two strikes in terms of players Leicester may regret letting go, with ANDREJ KRAMARIC deservedly getting the nod ahead of Chris Wood. The Foxes' drop-off in Jamie Vardy's absence this season is evidence of their lack of goals and viable alternative at centre-forward when the Englishman isn't available, as Kelechi Iheanacho continues to struggle to find the back of the net. Chris Wood was let go by Leicester for less than £3 million, but 2 seasons later he signed for Burnley for £15 million, where he's hit double figures in the Premier League in 3 consecutive seasons, including already this season. ANDREJ KRAMARIC was a big money signing under Nigel Pearson, but only played 20 games and scored just 4 goals for the Foxes. Since leaving Leicester in a cup-price move to Hoffenheim, the Croatian has bagged 64 goals in 142 games, and both Wood and KRAMARIC will be welcome additions to Brendan Rodgers' attacking options right now. Liverpool. Danny Ings. Liverpool have obviously sold a trio of world-class players in the forms of Luis Suarez, Raheem Sterling and Philippe Coutinho in the last few years, but all three pushed through their own moves, rather than being forced out of the club. I could throw a curveball in here with Jonjo Shelvey, but I don't think he'd get a look in under Jurgen Klopp, whereas Danny Ings, on this season's form, might just. Ings is a tireless runner with tremendous endeavour and a sharp eye for goal. Injury prevented him from ever getting going at Anfield, but 15 league goals and 18 in all competitions this season is evidence of his quality. Mohamed Salah is the only Liverpool player with more league goals than Ings this season, meaning he's outscored centre-forward Roberto Firmino. I don't think for 1 second that Ings is better than Firmino, but I do think he'd be a useful weapon for Liverpool in the event of squad rotation. Manchester City. Jadon Sancho. There are lots of talented young players that have been sold by Man City, so many in fact, that I made an entire video not that long ago looking at 7 of the best youngsters offloaded by the club. Whilst there is no shortage of options, Jadon Sancho is a rare talent and a player Man City will already rue having let leave the club. Everyone at the Etihad, from the youth coaches all the way up to Pep Guardiola, was well aware of the teenager's talents. However, Man City's depth and talent on the flanks meant opportunities were at a premium even for such a talented prospect. Sancho wasn't happy to sit around and chose to join Borussia Dortmund as a replacement for Ousmane Dembele. Following his season settling in, Sancho has been among the best players in the Bundesliga, combining pace, trickery and real invention, scoring and assisting at a remarkable rate. He left Man City for just £8 million and is now being valued at over £100 million. Manchester United. Paul Pogba. It would be interesting to play out a what-if scenario in which Cristiano Ronaldo had spent the last decade at Manchester United instead of leaving the club in 2009. Clearly he's the best player to have been sold by the Red Devils, but it was a sale very much that the club didn't want to let happen. In terms of players they've willingly sold, the likes of Wilfried Zaha, Memphis Depay, Angel Di Maria and even Romelu Lukaku could improve their current side, but I'm throwing out a bit of a left field shout with Paul Pogba. Of course, Pogba is at Manchester United and has had a mixed return to the club, but had they never let him go in the first place, they would be £89 million better off, and that money could have been spent on one or two world-class players. Newcastle United. Florian Thauvin. Kevin Mbabu deserves an honourable mention for Newcastle, having never really got a look in with the Magpies, but having resurrected his career in Switzerland. But the obvious choice is still Florian Thauvin. Sometimes a transfer which ticks all the boxes still just doesn't work out, and that was the case with Florian Thauvin at St James's Park. Thauvin arrived having impressed at Marseille, just like Hatem Ben Arfa did, but he didn't have the same impact in the northeast as his compatriot. Thauvin lasted just 6 months before returning to Marseille on loan for a season and a half, and then on a permanent. In the 2017-18 campaign, Thauvin scored 26 goals for Marseille and won the World Cup with France, with valuations of €18 million being stuck on his head. He's missed virtually all of this season through injury, but at full fitness, he'd be the best player at Newcastle. Norwich City. Daniel Ayala. Alright, I know, this isn't my best. From James Maddison and Robert Snodgrass to Nathan Redmond and Robbie Brady, Norwich City have sold some very good footballers in the last several years. All 4 of those players moved on to bigger and better things, despite the Canaries wanting to keep hold of them though, and therefore they don't fit the bill. Daniel Ayala is one player who played just 10 games in 3 years contracted to Norwich before being allowed to join Middlesbrough for just £350,000. Ayala is a capable top-end Championship and bottom-end Premier League centre-back, and whilst I don't think he'd be a major improvement on what Daniel Farke has at his disposal right now, letting him go for £350,000 was very cheap. Sheffield United. David Brooks. Sheffield United have sold some fine players, whether it be Harry Maguire to Hull City, Kyle Walker to Tottenham, or Shea Adams to Birmingham City. All moved on to what was at the time bigger and better things, rather than being shown the exit door though, and the same is true of my choice David Brooks. I've only gone for Brooks since he left the Blades in a move to Bournemouth the summer before Chris Wilder guided his team to promotion to the Premier League. Perhaps, if he had been better sold on the club's vision, he would have stuck around. Brooks has been injured for most of this season, but he is a class act as he showed in his debut campaign in the Premier League. A case could also be made for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but I think it would have been much more difficult for the Blades to convince him to stay following Everton's interest emerging. Southampton. Dusan Tadic. Few teams have sold as many fantastic young footballers as Southampton over the last 10 to 15 years, and it's remarkable to think the team that Southampton could have, with Gareth Bale, Virgil van Dijk, Sadio Mane, etc. still on their books. Yet again, all those players left of their own accord, but the Saints seemingly did little to prevent Dusan Tadic's departure in 2018. The Serbian playmaker, who can play out wide or through the middle, had 4 good seasons in the Premier League, although the last of the 4 was both his and Southampton's worst. Tadic seemed to have come to the end of the road at Southampton a couple of summers ago, and he has since stated he had grown tired of the Saints selling their best players, and the lack of protection he felt referees offered him in the Premier League. Southampton allowed Tadic to join Ajax for less than £10 million, and in his first season back in the Netherlands, Tadic put in genuine Ballon d'Or nominee-worthy form. I mean, 38 goals and more than 20 assists in 56 appearances is just ridiculous, and he came 20th in Ballon d'Or voting. The 31-year-old has continued in a similar vein this season, and what Southampton would do to have a player with his craft and invention this season. Tottenham. Gylfi Sigurdsson. I used Tottenham as the example of the criteria for this video in the introduction, and I hope I made myself clear. Spurs have sold the likes of Gareth Bale and Luka Modric, but they were powerless to prevent both players from leaving, whereas they let Gylfi Sigurdsson leave for peanuts of their own accord. I'm not saying Sigurdsson would help Spurs now, I don't think he really would, but the fact that he gave 3 seasons of impeccable service to Swansea City, who then sold him to Everton for £40 million plus, shows that they sold him for far too little. Moussa Dembele is another candidate, and I do think he'd improve the current Tottenham midfield, currently playing in China, but still aged only 32. Watford. BRITT Asombalonga. If it isn't a given by now, Richarlison doesn't feature because he chose to leave Watford rather than the club giving him the boot. There aren't many options for the Hornets, Mate Vidra perhaps, but they did at least recoup a decent fee for the Czech international. BRITT Asombalonga began his career at Vicarage Road, but played only 4 games for the club before being sold to Peterborough United for around £1.7 million. After a single season, the Posh sold Asombalonga for a potential £8 million to Nottingham Forest, and 3 years later, he was en route to Middlesbrough for a club record £15 million. Clearly, Watford didn't get full value for the Championship marksman, who may not improve them on the pitch right now, but could at least have helped line their pockets ahead of other deals. West Ham. Cheikhou Kouyaté. I could never quite understand why West Ham sold Cheikhou Kouyaté. The Senegalese international joined the Hammers for £6.75 million and gave 4 seasons of stellar service to the club. He was no Paulo Di Canio or Dimitri Payet, but Kouyaté brought energy and dynamism to the West Ham midfield, as well as offering real versatility. The fact that they let him go for only a couple of £1 million more than they had signed him for, and to a relegation rival in Crystal Palace, struck me as rather unusual at the time, and still does. Obviously, Hammers fans would rather have Payet or Arnautovic back than Kouyaté, if they could forgive them for their departures, but Kouyaté is my pick in terms of players willingly sold by the Londoners. Wolves. Jed Wallace. I'll be honest with you, this video sort of tailed off around the halfway mark and fell off a bit of a cliff after Dusan TADIC. I'm afraid I don't have a Champions League or World Cup winner for Wolves, but I do have one of the best players in the Championship. Former Portsmouth star Jed Wallace has been an absolute revelation since leaving Wolves to sign for Millwall, having only made 24 appearances in 2 seasons at Molineux. The 25-year-old has the 4th most goal contributions in the Championship this season, and the 3rd most if one discounts Jared Bowen, having scored 10 goals and made 9 assists. The Wolves side is a strong one, and Wallace may still struggle to break into it, but he'd certainly be a useful squad player given the extraordinary number of fixtures Nuno Espirito Santo's men have to contend with. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Feel free to give the video a like if you enjoyed it, in fact please do, and make sure you're subscribed to HITC Sevens, and head over to www.englandsgreatestdefender.com to have your mind blown by the best football book ever written.